started noticing the handprint a little after 1 in the morning. The store had already entered that strange hour where everything felt abandoned, even while the fluorescent lights still buzzed overhead and the refrigerators breathed cold air into the aisles. The late rush had ended around midnight. Since then, only 2 customers had come through: a taxi driver buying canned coffee and a woman in a raincoat who wandered the snack aisle without taking anything. After she left, the store settled into its usual mechanical rhythm. Compressors humming beneath the freezer cases, the soft rattle of the ceiling vent, rain dragging across the windows outside. I worked 4 nights a week at Havers Market, and I knew every sound the building made after midnight. The old freezers along the back wall carried a vibration through the floor tiles. If I stood at the register long enough, I could feel it in my knees. That night, though, the vibration felt different. Feverish. I was restocking frozen dinners when I first saw the print. A foggy mark on the inside of the freezer glass. At first, I assumed a customer had touched the door with damp fingers. The freezers sweated constantly during the rainy season. Condensation gathered along the corners and crawled downward in crooked trails. But this wasn't streaked like a fingerprint. It looked like a full hand. 5 pale shapes pressed against the misted glass from the other side. I stopped with a cardboard box against my chest and stared. The handprint was positioned too high to belong to a child and too large to belong to most women. Wide palm, long fingers, slightly crooked thumb. The freezer behind the door held bags of ice and frozen vegetables. No employee access behind it, just shelving and coolant lines. Still, I glanced toward the back room. Empty. I stepped closer because I wanted to know whether the print was really inside the glass. The fluorescent lights reflected over the door in dull white bars, making depth difficult to judge. When I leaned near enough for my breath to fog the surface, I realized something strange. The condensation around the handprint looked disturbed, not wiped away, pressed outward, as though warmth had touched the other side. The register beeped suddenly. I nearly dropped the box. A customer had entered through the automatic doors near the front. The motion chime echoed through the empty aisles with unnatural clarity. I looked away from the freezer, only for a second. When I looked back, the handprint was larger. Not dramatically, just enough that I noticed immediately. The fingers sat farther apart. One fingertip now touched the edge of a sales sticker hanging inside the door. I stared until my eyes watered. Nothing moved. The print remained perfectly still. My first thought was exhaustion. Darren was out sick, so I'd worked 6 night shifts in a row. Lack of sleep could distort perception, make distances feel wrong. I slid the freezer door open. Cold air spilled over my face and hands. Frost clung to the interior walls. Bags of ice stacked near the bottom shelf. No handprint. I ran my fingers over the inside of the glass. Dry. Freezing. When I shut the door again, the foggy shape slowly reappeared through the cooling condensation, exactly where it had been before. I finished stocking the aisle faster than usual after that. Every few minutes, I caught myself glancing back toward the freezer. Each time, the print looked unchanged while I watched it directly. But whenever I turned away for more than a moment, it seemed different afterward. Slightly larger, slightly clearer. By 2 o'clock, the fingertips extended halfway across the glass. I stopped trying to explain it logically around then. The store felt too quiet. Not empty. Quiet in the way a room becomes quiet when someone else is listening. I kept hearing sounds beneath the compressor hum. Tiny noises that disappeared whenever I focused on them. A soft scrape. Moisture squeaking across glass. Once, while mopping near the checkout lanes, I heard what sounded unmistakably like breathing behind me. I turned so quickly my shoulder struck the cigarette display. Nothing there. Only the freezer aisle glowing at the back of the store beneath fluorescent light. And the handprint, larger again. I avoided going near it for almost 20 minutes. Instead, I stayed at the register pretending to organize receipts while rain ticked softly against the windows. Every reflective surface in the store suddenly felt alive. The microwave door in the employee corner. The polished coffee machine. The black security monitor hanging above me. I kept imagining movement a fraction behind my own reflection. Around 2:30, the power flickered once. The lights dimmed and returned. The compressors groaned loudly as the system restarted. I looked automatically toward the freezer aisle. The handprint now covered almost the entire door. The fingers had stretched unnaturally long through the condensation like roots beneath water. The center of the palm sat at eye level now. And beside it was another mark. Not a second handprint. A smear. As though something had leaned its forehead against the opposite side of the glass. My mouth went dry. The security monitor crackled softly overhead. Static fluttered across one of the camera feeds before stabilizing again. Camera 7 showed the freezer aisle. The image quality was terrible at night, but I could still make out the white blur covering the freezer door. And standing in front of it, someone. A tall figure stood motionless before the glass with its back toward the camera. Wearing my uniform. For several seconds I couldn't move. Then I looked up from the monitor toward the aisle itself. Empty. Only the freezer door and the enormous fogged print spread across it. I looked back at the monitor. The figure was gone. I told myself the camera feed had lagged. Reflections distorted oddly at night. I knew that. Still, I could not shake the feeling that the figure on the monitor had been standing exactly where I usually stood when stocking shelves. Head slightly tilted. Watching the glass. The cold in the store deepened after that. Not normal refrigerated cold. This felt damp and invasive, sliding beneath my clothes. My fingertips numbed. Even my breath seemed visible when I exhaled near the register. I checked the thermostat twice. Normal temperature. Still, frost began gathering along the edges of several freezer doors. At 3 in the morning, the automatic entrance doors opened by themselves. No chime. They simply slid apart with a wet mechanical sigh. Rain air drifted inside. I waited for someone to enter. No one did. Beyond the doorway, the parking lot shimmered empty beneath the streetlights. Then the doors closed again. The store had begun affecting my sense of distance. The aisles seemed subtly longer than usual. Even the reflections looked delayed. When I walked past the freezer section, I kept catching movement beside me in the glass a split second too late. Not ahead. Trailing behind. By 3:30, I understood the pattern. The handprint only changed when I stopped observing it. If I stared directly at the glass, nothing happened. But the moment I looked away, even blinking too long sometimes, the shape altered afterward. Expanded. Sharpened. Once, after helping a customer pay for gas, I returned to find faint outlines of knuckles pressing beside the original hand. Another hand forming. I stopped looking entirely after that. I stayed behind the register with my eyes fixed on the counter while the compressors hummed through the floor. I rearranged gum packs, counted receipts, anything to avoid seeing the freezer aisle. But awareness settled heavily at the back of my mind, like someone standing close behind me. The worst part was the certainty that something was happening whenever I wasn't looking. Not moving toward me. Becoming. Around 4:15, the humming changed. The compressor noise lowered in pitch until it resembled a distant human exhale. Slow. Rhythmic. The security monitor flickered again. Without meaning to, I glanced upward. Camera 7 showed the freezer aisle. The glass was completely white now with condensation. And at its center stood a dark silhouette pressing outward from inside. Human-shaped. One hand flattened against the door. My hand. Same crooked thumb. Same scar across the knuckle near my index finger. I felt suddenly certain of something impossible. It wasn't trapped in the freezer. It was learning me. My breathing became shallow. I kept staring at the monitor while static crawled across the image. The silhouette never moved directly. Yet every time the screen distorted for half a second, the figure seemed closer afterward. Nearer the glass. More distinct. The outline of my shoulders. The angle of my head. The shape of my apron. Then the monitor blinked black entirely. When the feed returned, camera 7 showed an empty aisle. I looked toward the back of the store. The freezer door stood uncovered now. No condensation. No handprint. Nothing. Relief hit me so suddenly my knees weakened. Then I noticed the cold. Not behind me, in front of me, the register counter glass had fogged faintly from the inside. And slowly, while I watched, 5 pale shapes pressed outward beneath the condensation. I was halfway through my shift when the man walked in carrying a small cardboard box. It was 1:07 a.m., the hour when Ridgeway Market felt less like a convenience store and more like a place the world forgot. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead with that faint, electric whine that always made my jaw clench. Rain tapped against the windows in a steady, impatient rhythm. The aisles were empty except for the occasional flicker of movement from the security monitors. I wasn't alone, though. Not tonight. Mara, the new hire, was restocking the chip aisle. She was 19, nervous, and always carried a small notebook where she wrote down every task like she was afraid of forgetting how to breathe. She kept glancing toward the front doors as if expecting someone. And then there was Carl, the night security guard. He was in his 50s, built like a refrigerator, and spent most of his shift sitting in the back office watching old boxing matches on his phone. He only came out when something actually happened, which was rare. Until tonight, the man entered without triggering the motion chime. The doors slid open for him, but the chime stayed silent. I didn't notice at first. I was counting cigarette cartons behind the counter, trying to ignore the flickering light above register 2. When I finally looked up, he was already standing at the counter. "I need to return this," he said. His voice was calm, too calm, like someone reading a line they'd practiced. He placed the cardboard box on the counter. It was light, almost empty, yet he handled it like it contained something fragile. Mara peeked around the corner, watching him. She mouthed, "Who is that?" I shrugged. "What's the issue with it?" I asked. He blinked slowly, as if the question confused him. "It wasn't meant for me," he said. "I'm returning it." I opened the box. Inside was a small metal object, about the size of a lighter. Smooth, featureless, cold enough that I felt the chill through my gloves. "Do you have the receipt?" I asked. He slid a folded slip of paper across the counter. The moment I touched it, something felt wrong. The paper was warm. Receipts are never warm. I unfolded it and felt my stomach tighten. The date printed at the top wasn't today. It wasn't yesterday. It wasn't any date I recognized. It read 12/31/9999 23:59:59. I stared at it, waiting for my brain to correct itself. Didn't. "This can't be right," I said. "It is," the man replied softly. "That's when the transaction was made." Mara stepped closer. "Is that a joke?" The man didn't look at her, didn't acknowledge her at all. "It's not a joke," he said. "I'm returning it before the deadline." I looked at the receipt again. The item description was a single word: reclamation. "What is this thing?" I asked. He shook his head. "Not mine to explain." "Then whose is it?" He hesitated, and for the first time, I saw something flicker across his expression. Fear. "Yours," he whispered. Mara backed up a step. "Okay, nope. I'm calling Carl." She hurried toward the back office. The man didn't react. "You're mistaken," I said. "I've never seen this before." "You will," he said. "But you shouldn't. That's why I'm returning it now." The fluorescent lights buzzed louder, as if straining to hear. The rain outside stopped abruptly. The store fell into a silence so complete it felt physical. Carl emerged from the back, adjusting his belt. "What's going on out here?" The man finally turned his head. Not toward Carl. Toward the security cameras above him, as if checking something. Carl stepped between us. "Sir, I'm gonna need you to." The man raised a hand. Not threateningly, just acknowledging. "You can't stop this," he said. "It's already been purchased." Carl frowned. "Purchased by who?" The man pointed at me. "You already know." I didn't, but something deep in my chest tightened, like a memory trying to surface. Carl reached for the box. "Let me see what." The metal object vibrated. Just once. A low, Resonant hum filled the store, vibrating through the floor tiles. Mara screamed. The lights flickered. The receipt in my hand changed. The timestamp now read 23:59:58. 1 second less. Carl stepped back. What the hell? The man sighed. I'm sorry. I tried to return it early. But the system recognized him. What system? I whispered. He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped away from the counter. You should all leave, he said. But it won't matter. The automatic doors opened for him without a sound. He stepped into the night and vanished. Not walked away. Vanished. The doors closed again. Mara clutched my arm. What is happening? Carl grabbed the box. I'm taking this outside. He didn't make it 3 steps. The lights went out. All of them. The store plunged into darkness. The hum grew louder, vibrating through the shelves, the floor, the air. The security monitors flickered back on by themselves. Every screen showed the same thing. A countdown. 23:59:57. 23:59:56. 23:59:55. Mara sobbed. Make it stop. Carl slammed the box onto the counter. Open it. I already did, I said. The metal object glowed faintly now, pulsing with each second. The receipt fused to my hand. I tried to peel it off. It wouldn't budge. The timestamp shifted again. 23:59:54. Carl grabbed my wrist. Kid, what did you buy? I didn't buy anything. Mara pointed at the monitors. Look, the cameras now showed the aisles. But not as they were. Not empty. Each aisle was filled with people. Hundreds. All standing perfectly still. All facing the camera. All identical to the man who had returned the item. Carl whispered, What the hell? The figures blinked in unison. The countdown ticked. 23:59:53. The metal object opened. Not mechanically, like an eye. A single vertical slit of white light. The hum became a voice. Not words. Recognition. Mara collapsed to her knees. Please, please make it stop. Carl tried to smash the object with his flashlight. The light swallowed the impact. The slit widened. The figures on the monitors stepped forward. All at once, the store temperature dropped so fast frost formed on the counter. My breath crystallized in the air. The receipt burned against my palm. The timestamp shifted again. 23:59:52. I understood then. The man hadn't been returning the item. He'd been delivering it. To me. To finish a transaction I didn't remember making. A transaction made at the end of the world. The light expanded, filling the store. The figures reached the end of the aisles. The countdown continued. And whatever reclamation meant, it was coming for all of us.